It's exciting on one hand to see some people on the left beginning to get it, to wake up, to really become awake to wokeness. And then on the other hand, it gets really frustrating when you see they're getting it, but yet still trying to hang on to the narrative.
Good morning to you.
And now, an educational feature brought to you by The Afternoon Drive.
The woke left is waking up.
It's too late to say good night, so say good morning.
One thing that the pandemic back in 2020 did was pretty much polarize the left and the right. And the game of bread and circuses when it comes to politics by the ruling oligarch, it couldn't have played out any better. The country was divided, not simply over Trump and Biden, but over a virus, how to handle it, how severe is it, how not severe is it, should we follow mandates, should we ignore mandates, and everybody was on one side or the other. These sides became very politicized, very polarizing, and it really played right through the election, and it brought serious consequences because people made decisions based on what they felt was the narrative that not only had Trump walked twice on impeachment, but didn't know how to handle the pandemic and the viral outbreak, and now the economy's tanking, and we need change, and we need it now. And Joe Biden was then thrust upon us, and now many of them are waking up to what actually happened. And some of them in the very beginning, they went along with all of the mandates. They went along with everything that they were told by the experts, because after all, the experts were not Trump. The experts were not the evil orange man. The experts, why, they really care about us. And Trump is this tyrannical maniac that's just trying to take our rights away from us and keep people out of our country, and he's bad, and he's got to go. Now that they are beginning to wake up to the fact that they too, even after they have followed all of the rules, all of the protocols, are coming down with the virus. Omicron is spreading. Now, the good news is that the virus has mutated to the point that it is spreading now faster ever than before. But, as virologists will tell you, especially the ones that actually took real science, and this is the way it's been taught for years, that when a virus begins to mutate, the faster it mutates and the faster it spreads, the less fatal it is. That's actual science. We have always known that. When the flu of 1812 began to mutate, and it would spread quickly, but each variant was less fatal, less severe. In fact, we're still dealing in 2022, we're still dealing with the flu of 1918. Strain after strain after strain after strain after strain after strain after strain. And that doesn't mean that for some people, occasionally, that it isn't very serious. And it is. And people do die of influenza. We don't hear about that in the media anymore, but it does happen. And so we understood that as a virus mutated and it spread quickly, that in order to be able to mutate so quickly and spread so rapidly, it actually deteriorates itself. And so Omicron ought to be celebrated as, look, 2 years ago, we were in the midst of a pandemic. We didn't know what was going on. Well, some of us did. We didn't know what was going on. And now it looks like we're at the place where we can call this an endemic. But of course, the powers that be, especially those that still want to figure out how to make money from it, and those who want to figure out how to gain control from it, aren't going to let it go, don't want to let it go. But there are now people on the left that are waking up who followed all the rules, wore their 10 masks, stayed 70 feet apart from people, didn't kiss their grandmother for a year and a half, and now that they're getting it, even though they're double, tripled, and quadruple jabbed, now even they're saying, like CNN anchors, well, I guess we really should stop shaming people. And I guess we unknowingly were doing that. Unknowingly? Yeah, you were shaming people. The president himself said this is an outbreak of the unvaccinated. The science is overwhelming on this now, that this is a viral outbreak that everyone is going to have to deal with. And the left is finally waking up to that, and because they are waking up to it, now they're saying, wait a minute, to a lot of these endless mandates. And we're now seeing the CDC and Dr. Fauci begin to act change and even do things like admit they overcounted. Shazam, Batman. We already knew that. Well, after Joe Rogan aired his interview with Dr. Robert Malone, and Dr. Malone was kicked off of Twitter, permanently banned, YouTube dropped the Joe Rogan interview with Dr. Robert Malone, one of the inventors of the mRNA technology, which was used for the base of this vaccine. Again, it got people talking, and people on the left began to realize, Houston, we have a problem. These regulatory agencies like the FDA, which are supposed to regulate the producers of medication and drugs, are actually being funded by the very people they're supposed to be regulating. They're actually have members of their corporate boards are now on the regulatory boards. The news media, which is supposed to set us straight on this and be another watchdog, another layer of protection, is being funded night after night after night by the big pharmaceutical companies. They're the ones that pay the bills that keep places like CNN on the air. And the left, the progressive left, is waking up to that.
Pharma is such a cancer upon our healthcare system that from now to the future, we have to abolish so much of their control, because it actually makes it so that people have legitimate reason to be suspect. Another thing I did not know until listening to Dr. Peter McCullough and Robert Malone, and also I'm blanking on his name, the guy who did the sickening episode around Big Pharma.
John Abramson.
John Abramson, which was, that once again, I had no idea, was that whenever it comes to the actual data that is turned over for peer-reviewed journals, that data is actually owned by Big Pharma, who conduct the trials themselves, and that the quality control over the actual raw data itself is not turned over, which means that they can try and screw with data in different ways, that they've been caught doing so in court cases, for example, like Vioxx.
Not to mention the vaccine itself, part of the process for it to receive FDA approval, crossed the desk of Anthony Fauci's wife. Think about that. That's fact. That's truth. Check on that. Now, that said, even though Saagar Enjeti at Breaking Points, along with Crystal Ball, they get it. We can't have Big Pharma funding the very studies and overseeing the approval process of the product that they stand to benefit from financially. But then at the same token, they still want to hang on to the narrative.
Look, the data is pretty clear. They like to talk about data. This one is clear as day. Let's put it up there. This is from Derek Thompson. I mean, look at this. We are talking about a risk of hospitalization across every single age group, which is dramatically reduced from vaccination. Now, that is a fact. But look, it is true that there does seem to be a deep discomfort of people to acknowledge some basic facts, which is that from the beginning, yes, we were sold a message that COVID vaccines would prevent you from getting COVID for a variety of reasons around breakthrough, Delta, Omicron, and all that. That seems to be, the effect of that has been reduced very much over time, certainly not with what the expectation was there. However, the hospitalization and death one is certainly there. In terms of the adverse effects, simply right now in the data, there is no reliable way to know.
Now again, for disclaimer purposes, on YouTube. I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on television, and I do not dispense medical advice. The vaccines are here, and we are told that they are safe. That's what we're told. That said, let me at least ask a question or two here. You're saying that, okay, we now admit that the vaccine does not stop the virus, but it will certainly lessen the severity of it in the people who have received it. And where exactly did you get this data from that you're quoting? Who funded that data? Is it the very people who also funded the other data that we find out is incorrect? Did Big Pharma, are they the ones providing that data that this lessens the severity? Or the fact that the virus is mutating so quickly and it is self-degenerating as it does that and becoming less and less severe, like Omicron, is that why hospitalizations are down? And we're now admitting we were overcounting anyway. Bum, ba-dum, bum. So again, you're gonna, on the one hand, you're woke. You get it. We've been lied to by Big Pharma, but this set of stats they gave us, this is real. Are you sure? And then when you say, there's no real data to prove that there's any real harmful or bad effects. Oh no? There's actually a lot of reports out there. Again, who paid for it? We talk about we want independent, not in anybody's pocketbook, experts to report on these things. So when Big Pharma provides all kinds of studies that obviously are going to make their product look completely safe and wonderful, we should approach that with a little bit of skepticism, like, well, is this about the bottom line or about our health? And when a group of independent scientists put together a survey and say, Houston, we have found some problems, why do they automatically get discredited when they're not in it for any type of financial gain other than, hey, here, we took a look at this and here are some problems we see? Now, that doesn't mean that they're 100% correct either, but shouldn't we have access to what it is they're saying? Because there are a whole lot of reports, you can't get them here in this particular platform, that there are all kinds of issues going on. But then Saagar also had this to say.
To me, my main takeaway is it is very clear that the vaccine works. It is very clear also that uncomfortable conversations are being dramatically censored off of YouTube, Twitter, and more, which is fueling a lot of people's conspiracy. And third, which is that the core of it to me is that the pharma control over the data and more has to end. It just has to.
Yeah.
Okay, you agree that Big Pharma funding the news is bad because that will obviously, the news agencies which depend on the Big Pharma checks to pay the big salaries, how can they possibly be objective? That's a good question. When Big Pharma pays for medical institutions, funds and underwrites hospitals, funds and underwrites science labs and experimentation and development. So you're right to point out that this whole issue of Big Pharma has become too powerful. You're 100% right. But when you then sit there and say, hey, what we have, it works, who told you that? Who told you that? Again, I'm just asking a simple question. Who told you that? Where did that data come from? Who funded that research? You're not asking enough questions, Saagar.